much of that comes in resources like funding for additional employees, and things along the lines of equipment.
He said the main concern is economic devastation that could affect livestock producers due to treatment of animals and inefficiencies that come with it.
It's not a food safety issue. If there's an infestation or a wound with larvae in it, it's readily noticeable, and not just from sight, but also there's a smell.
He said the parasite is treatable, and most animals will recover and are safe to go back through the food chain once cured. He also said some people who have traveled to Central America have contracted the screwworm. I'm Robert Thornton.
Billionaire businessman Rick Caruso is considering another run for L.A. mayor. Fox's Kristen Goodwin has more.
Rick Caruso suggesting to LA's Fox 11 News he's reconsidering a run for LA mayor.
I'm certainly thinking about it.
Reacting to a Los Angeles Times investigation reporting LA Mayor Karen Bass wanted key findings of an after-action report on the Palisades fire to be softened before it was public.
It makes me very concerned about the future of LA. I'll put it that way. So it's weighing heavily on me.
Bass's office says there was absolutely no reason why she would request those details be altered or erased when she herself has been critical of the response to the fire, full stop. Caruso has criticized Bass's handling of the fires. Bass defeated him in the 2022 mayoral race and is up for re-election.
If you're hitting the road this weekend, expect to pay a national average of $2.90 for a gallon of regular gasoline. That's down from $2.87 this time last week. $3.13 on this day last year. That's all our time for now. Find more news on afn.net. When you're there, be sure to subscribe to our free daily email news briefs. You can also like us on Facebook and follow us on X. Thanks for listening.
AFA Action takes attacks on the family seriously. The enemies of the family constantly employ new tactics to try to sneak past our radar. They know if we stand together, their evil plans will fail. Your gift to AFA Action allows us to stay vigilant against their onslaught. And if you give this month, you'll receive access to the Cultural Institute video When Your Faith is Illegal by Frank Harbor on AFA Stream as our thanks. You can make your gift today at afaaction.net.
Jenna Ellis in the morning on American Family Radio.
I love talking about the things of God because of truth and the biblical worldview. The U.S. Constitution obligates our government to preserve and protect the rights that our founders recognize come from God, our Creator, not our government. I believe that Scripture in the Bible is very clear that God is the one that raised up each of you, and God has allowed us to be brought here to this specific moment in time.
This is Jenna Ellis in the morning.
Good morning. It is Friday, February 6th, and we've been talking about a lot of the important races for 2026 across the country, including my home state of Florida and our governor's race. Incredibly important to see who succeeds Governor Ron DeSantis in the free state of Florida. But, you know, we also want to pay attention to some other races in states that hopefully we can flip a little more conservative. And that shockingly includes the state of California. And per Politico, as of January 23rd, so just a couple of weeks ago, the two Republican candidates are actually leading the polls in California's gubernatorial race. That includes Chad Bianco at 18% and then Steve Hilton at 17%. The closest Democrat is Katie Porter at 14%. Eric Swalwell, who thinks somehow he can be governor, that's actually hilarious, is at 11%, and then the list goes down from there. But Steve Hilton, who is actually our good friend, Pastor Jack Hibbs, a choice for California governor, and that endorsement actually really means a lot to me personally. Steve Hilton joins us now. So good morning, Steve, and thanks so much. So tell us the landscape in California and how it possibly could be a Republican that wins the governor's office.
Jenna, it's so wonderful to be with you again. It's been a while, but it was always a great joy to have you as a guest on my show on Fox back in the day, and I'm really happy that we could speak today. It's amazing, isn't it, in one sense, because people think of California as this deep blue state, But the fact that it's a deep blue state is exactly the reason that I think we're going to flip it red this year, because we've had 16 years of one-party rule in California. And look at the results. It's a total disaster on every front. Across the country, of course, people can see the visible signs of the utter calamity that is Newsom and his regime of cronies and corrupt bureaucrats and people stealing money for homelessness and all those things. The homelessness on the streets and the smash and grab crime, all those things are very visible. But actually, if you look deeper than that, and this is the experience of daily life for Californians, it is unbelievable. Right now, California, we have the highest poverty rate in the country, the highest unemployment rate of all 50 states, the highest cost of living for everything, highest gas prices, rent, insurance, utilities, groceries, everything the most expensive in America. And there's nothing you can look at where they can point to success. The schools are a disaster. The crime is a disaster. And after all of that time where they've been just taking us pretty much towards the cliff edge, Californians are saying, we don't want to go over the cliff. It is time for change. If you look at the polling, not so much in the governor's race, but more broadly in terms of people's desire for change in California, it's a big majority that wants change. 60%, 65% saying the state's going in the wrong direction. So that's our opportunity, combined with a couple of things I'll just mention. Number one, if you look at the number of votes that President Trump got in California in the presidential election in 2024 without even campaigning here, it wasn't a target seat for the Trump campaign. They didn't spend money on advertising. Nevertheless, the number of votes the president got, 6.1 million, would be more than enough to elect me governor in a midterm year. So it's all about getting the turnout up, the Republican voters out to vote in a midterm year for governor. And we've got a really big help with that on the ballot this November, which is voter ID. The ballot initiative for voter ID is going to be there on the ballot this November. That'll really help boost Republican turnout. The other thing that's such an important point, and you touched on it in your appropriate tone with respect to Eric Swalwell, these Democrat candidates are a disaster. They don't have a strong candidate. Katie Porter, Eric Swalwell, all the rest are just complete non-entities. There's no one there with any kind of leadership or any hint that they can take. They can sort of deliver the change that we need in California. The final point I'd make is that because we have this ridiculous top two system in California where the top two candidates could go forward regardless of party. Right now, a lot of Republicans are getting excited and seeing those poll results showing me and Chad Bianco in the top two saying we could have two Republicans. That's not going to happen. The Democrat machine will pick their puppet. The unions will get behind one of the candidates. And in fact, the real danger is that we have two Democrats in the top two. And that's why in the first TV debate this week, I made very clear that we Republicans have to get behind one candidate. And I'm afraid Chad Bianco, my Republican opponent, really disqualified himself actually nearly 6 years ago in the Black Lives Matter riots in 2020. He took a knee for BLM. And that is really disqualifying for me. And worse than that, now when he's trying to explain it away, he says he was praying. Praying. I mean, it's such an insult to everyone of faith. People can watch the video. We put it up at blmbianco.org. He's got a lot of baggage, Jenna, and I'm the candidate with the business experience, the government reform experience, the policy expertise. I'm the one to get behind, and that's the argument I'm making strongly in this campaign.
You know, and that's such a great point, Steve Hilton, that, you know, Republicans really should coalesce behind one candidate, especially in a really difficult state where a split vote could end up with two Democrats moving forward, and especially in that kind of system. That's exactly the same thing that we saw and what President Trump was pushing in the New York City mayoral race, that, you know, if one of the two Republicans had stepped aside, there may have been enough to overcome Zoran Mamdani. But now we have, you know, the communist mayor in New York City. And so I think you're right that this video as well of Chad Bianco speaks for itself. And, you know, we'll certainly invite Chad Bianco to come on the program and tell us, you know, what his explanation is for this. But I think just very clearly looking at this, and it's also posted on your X page at Steve Hilton X, this video doesn't show him praying, at least in any part of the video that's posted. And this was while he was sheriff. And this was also, during, as you mentioned, 2020. And for a Republican to succeed in California, I think it has to be pretty clear that he's actually a Republican, he's actually conservative. And so what do you think is the possibility that voters will at least coalesce behind you and see that message, hear that loud and clearly, even if Bianco stays in the race, say, you know what, the voters, we're just going to go ahead and coalesce behind one candidate, pick our Republican, choose our fighter, and pick that lane?
But that's right. It's the fighter. It's the fighter that we need. And I think that, as well as pointing out that we can't have a candidate with as much baggage as Chad Bianco. My little joke in the debate was that he's got more baggage than LAX. I mean, there's a longer list even than the BLM kneeling. But let's move on to what I want to really talk about in the campaign, which is my positive plans for dealing with the absolute mess that the Democrats have left. And I think that's actually what people want in California. And I've got right from the start of my campaign, I've been very clear that we really need to focus on positive, practical plans that help the people who've been hurt the most by these Democrat policies, and that's working class Californians paying these extortionate costs for everything because of this insane left-wing ideology. And we can't run away from that. I think for too long, Jenna, in California, Republicans have tried to get elected with an assumption that the only way you get anywhere is to try and water it down a little bit and be a kind of, very moderate and practically Democrat light. That's hopeless. That's totally wishy-washy. No one's going to go out and positively vote for that. You've got to be clear. And I'm clear that we are going to end the Democrats' insane climate crusade. So that instead of what we have now, the highest gas prices in the country, $5 gas, heading even higher according to many estimates, we're going to get rid of all that. So we have $3 gas in California. We're going to end the insanity of subsidizing solar and putting all our effort into windmills and solar power. So we use natural gas for our electricity so that we can cut electric bills in half. We have the highest electric bills everywhere in the country, apart from Hawaii. We're going to cut them in half. We are going to end the fraud and the bloat and the corruption in state government so we can cut taxes, particularly for working people. My pledge is your first $100,000 tax-free. We're going to end Gavin Newsom's outrageous free health care for illegal immigrants. That's costing about $20 billion a year in California, so we can lower healthcare costs for Californians. And finally, we're going to end the insane regulations that make it so expensive to build anything in California, so we can restore the California dream of a home you can afford to buy, a single-family home. They're at war with single-family homes in California. It's all about, they're trying to shove apartments into suburban neighborhoods, and everything is this affordable housing, which is a total lie. It's money in the pockets of crony developers. We're going to get rid of all that. A home you can afford to buy. So these simple things, I think, but they're very beneath each one of them is a very strong plan to reverse the far-left ideology that brought us to this point.
And I think that's a fantastic plan and everything that California really needs. And it isn't unprecedented to have, this type of blue regime come to an end. I mean, we saw this flip in Virginia. Unfortunately, now it's kind of flipped back with Abigail Spanberger getting in the governor's office in Virginia. But for California, it's definitely possible, and especially in this moment, I think when affordability is at the fore, when people are seeing, a lot of these big issues around the economy, those are things especially the young voters want to see. What are you seeing on the ground in Florida with the young voter turnout and how invested some of these kids in California are in politics?
Well, it's very, there's a lot of enthusiasm. And in fact, we've been talking very closely with Turning Point and other organizations. Charlie was a good friend of mine. He endorsed me on day one of my campaign. He was actually going to be there, but we moved the date. So he was traveling. And so Charlie was always, he used to put it in a beautiful way. He always said, I have a heart for California. He always said a lot of Republicans nationally may have given up on California, but he hadn't. He loved our state, hated what the Democrats have done to it. And we've been talking very closely about working with Turning Point and others And students, I mean, the Republican students are very, very strong in California, including in places you wouldn't expect. I did an event on Berkeley campus, very good turnout with Republican students there. In fact, some of them came along. I saw them the other night at an event that I did in the Bay Area. So look, you've got real energy there, and that is the point, because the heartbreaking thing about what's happening in California is actually what's going on with young people, and I see it all the time. And parents tell me, and grandparents, that the young people are just saying, I can't make it happen in California. If I want that very simple, California dream that we used to offer better than anywhere else in the world, get a good job where you make enough to own a home of your own, to raise your family in a nice neighborhood with a good school so your kids have a better life, that's gone. And so young people are saying, well, if I want that, if I want to be able to afford to raise a family or own a home, I have to go and do it in Florida or Tennessee or Texas. And no offense to those states, great. But, we want our young people to be doing it here in California. And so it's actually really at the heart of what I'm fighting for, is for the next generation to offer them the opportunity, as we once did, to make California the best place anywhere in the world to start and raise a family, to start and run a business. That's what we need to get back to.
Yeah, absolutely. And what a great endorsement as well to have with Charlie's support. And I know he didn't give that lightly. He was very involved and concerned for every state, knowing that these elections are important. It's not just a matter of where one individual resides. It's that California, of course, impacts other states across the country. Yeah. And so for people who are listening in other states, right now, you still need to be concerned about what's going on in California, like you should be concerned about what's going on in my home state of Florida, like you should be concerned about what's going on in your home state, and making sure that we elect the best possible candidates, across the country, because this ultimately matters to every single state. And in California in particular, Steve Hilton, there has always been this kind of outstanding question, and of course it came to the fore in 2020 with election integrity, and some of the concerns that California residents, even people that I talked to on the ground when I was there representing several churches during the whole COVID narrative, that we're saying, well, we would love to see Republicans in office, but I just don't think that that's possible in California, especially, in Los Angeles or, some of these other really, really deep blue counties. What is your plan to maybe overcome some of that, or if that's even just a vote suppression element where people think, well, what does it matter if I even come out and vote?
It's an incredibly important point. I have to tell you, this question comes up in every single event that I do. California, we've got a town hall tour going on right now. We've got about 100 stops. We've got hundreds of people coming to each one. It's called the Califordable town hall tour, focused on the plans I laid out earlier. But this question comes up every time, and there are so many aspects to it. It's barely, we won't even have time to get into them all. But exactly as you said, they took the pandemic and the lockdowns and they exploited it for their partisan political ends by messing around with the election system. And so now you've got all these insane things going on. You've got mass mail-in ballots where they send ballots out to everyone on the electoral roll. So you've got millions of ballots floating around that shouldn't even be out there because the voter rolls have been so completely out of date and wrong. You've had, the estimate is there were 5 million people on the voter rolls that shouldn't have been. Dead people with, who've moved address and they're registered twice, or who've moved out of state and shouldn't be on the rolls at all these kinds of issues. Now, the good news on that is that even in the last 2 years, thanks to the pressure of various people and the work of many, many good people, ranging from Judicial Watch to a guy called Shiloh Marks to the federal government, now since the Trump administration took office, Harmeet Dillon and her team, the estimate is that at least 2.5, maybe 3 million of those ballots, people that shouldn't be on the voter rolls, have already been taken off. So we're moving in the right direction very strongly on that one. But we've still got a long way to go. Secondly, voter ID is on the ballot. Now, that won't be operational for this election in November, but the fact that it's on the ballot, as I mentioned earlier, will help drive turnout, and we're very confident of it passing because it's got overwhelming support even here in California. But beyond that, there's not a lot that we can do until we actually get elected. I mean, of course, we need to, I've long argued for, very simple basic reforms like vote on one day, count on one day, get the results on one day, paper ballots, not these ridiculous machines, and so on. And there's other things that we need to, I'll just give you one example of how insane it is in California. The fact that you've got this, because of the mail-in ballots, they count election day as the last day you mail it. In other words, they count the ballots for 7 days after the election day. And what's insane is that you can actually, they don't look at the postmark, you can write the date on yourself in hand. So, of course, that means that after Election Day, they look at how many ballots they need, and there's a perfect possibility for them to get more, because there's all these ballots floating around, and you don't even have to have an actual postmark. Now, that could change, because there's a case that the Supreme Court just took up the other week that would make that, that would stop that. So there's things happening that are moving us in the right direction, but in the end, there's no substitute for what, as President Trump put it in 2024, we've got to make it too big to rig. That's the plan. We've just got to get the vote out to the highest extent we can.
Yeah, and I think that's the perfect message to California voters is that, especially as you mentioned, this is a midterm year, and so there's not as just naturally as high of a turnout as there is in a presidential year. Having that voter ID measure will increase turnout, but that may also increase turnout of some of the Democrats as well. And so for anybody in California who really cares about this, they should be voting, and they should absolutely turn out. And so, Steve Hilton, we're already almost out of time. I so appreciate you coming by this morning to talk about this, because if conservatives can get back into power in California, that could really change the trajectory of this entire country. And I think that, this is really wonderful that you're doing this. So how can people get involved in California? What are the critical dates in terms of registration if they're not registered, and so forth?
Thanks. Yes, exactly. Really important. So first of all, you support the campaign in any way you can. You can get involved as a volunteer. We've got a great grassroots army building. That's at stevehiltonforgovernor.com, F-O-R, stevehiltonforgovernor.com. Share our content on social media. You can register right up until and even on the same day. But let's get it done earlier than that. On June the 2nd, which is primary day, there's an earlier deadline, which is March the 6th, which is the filing deadline for candidates. And I'm really hoping that we can persuade people to get behind me as the Republican champion to fight the Democrats before then. And I just want to re-emphasize what you said earlier, which this affects everyone in the country. So one of the ways I describe it is, for these 16 years of one-party rule, the Democrats have turned California into the Wuhan lab of far-left extremism. They cook up all these crazy ideas, but then they leave, don't stay in California. The gender extremism, the climate extremism, all this insanity, it all started here, and then it kind of seeps out and infects the rest of America. So if we beat it here, we're not only helping everyone in California, we're helping all of America.
Absolutely. Well, Godspeed to you, Steve Hilton. I hope that you come back. Your open invitation anytime to come back and talk about this critical race. I'm really excited for you that you're pulling this high. I hope that Pastor Jack Hibbs will continue to help you with, of course, the evangelical turnout. That's so incredibly important. So listeners can go to Steve Hilton X on X, and also Steve Hilton for Governor, F-O-R, stevehiltonforgovernor.com, and we will be right back with more.
Maybe this is you too. There's enormous frustration right now with healthcare costs. It is amazing. Healthcare costs for families in the last 20 years have almost tripled, and it just keeps getting worse. All this to say, this is why MediShare is so in demand right now. People are looking for alternatives, and MediShare is proven. You can save thousands of dollars a year and actually like it more. Over 1 million Americans are now part of healthcare sharing, and MediShare is the gold standard. It's trusted, it works, it's been helping people save money and have peace of mind now for 30 plus years. It's not some big impersonal thing either. It's a community of people like you helping each other. So yeah, if you're frustrated too, here's your chance to make a refreshing change. You'll notice the difference As soon as you call, they're easy to talk to. You can get a price within 2 minutes. Here is the number. Call 833-44-BIBLE. That's 833-44-BIBLE. 833-44-BIBLE.
The following is a real-life story from Trinity Debt Management.
I had a lot of credit card debt, and it stressed me out. But what I thought was a solution turned out to be a problem. I kept hearing ads about debt settlement that seemed too good to be true. And actually, it was. When I called, they told me to stop paying my bills. That didn't sound right to me at all, so I hung up. Later, I found out that debt settlement is bad. Real bad. Then I learned that there is a right way to pay off your credit cards. It's called a debt management program from the great team at Trinity. Trinity had a plan. In the end, I paid off my bills, I saved thousands, and I even improved my credit score.
If credit card debt has you down, call Trinity at 1-800-788-1813.
My name is Heather. Please forget debt settlement and remember Trinity Debt Management.
1-800-788-1813.
Hello, Americans. I'm Todd Starnes. Stand by for news and commentary next. A Minneapolis Hampton Inn is in the national spotlight after they refuse to provide rooms for federal agents. The Department of Homeland Security says the hotel chain's decision is unacceptable. They accused Hilton of siding with murderers and rapists and undermining law enforcement. In response, Hilton said that particular Hampton Inn was actually independently owned and operated. Everpeak Hospitality posted a statement apologizing for what happened, said they don't discriminate. However, an investigative journalist filmed a clerk at the Hampton Inn refusing once again to provide rooms to federal agents. Corporate headquarters stepped in, said the independent operator is not meeting their standards. As such, they've been removed from the company's reservation system. Now, Everpeak owns and operates 4 hotels in the Marriott and Hilton chains. The company is owned by Indian Americans. Maybe there's another reason the hotel owners did not want ICE agents on their property. I'm Todd Starnes.
Welcome back to Jenna Ellis in the Morning on American Family Radio.
Welcome back. And as you know, we have a weekly podcast called On Demand with Jenna Ellis. This is our AFR exclusive where we do deep dives into issues that you care about from guests that you love to hear from. And this week, actually coming out today, there is an exclusive interview that I have with Raw Egg Nationalist, one of our favorite guests, talking about the trans agenda and how he actually wrote this article talking about the Epstein files and how a renowned scientist, and renowned from like a leftist perspective, he's an evolutionary biologist, so he's not renowned to any of us. But this guy who is lauded by the left is talking about the benefits of turning children trans. Like, it's so disgusting. And you absolutely need to know what's going on in all of this. We're going to play just a little bit of my interview with him, but I would encourage you to listen to the full podcast. We didn't want to play the full interview on air because this does get into, unfortunately, some kind of graphic content just because of the nature of the trans agenda, the nature of the Epstein files, and, some of these emails that went back and forth. So listener discretion advised. If you are parents of small kids, you may want to listen to the podcast, once they're asleep or, when they're at school or, some other time. So we just wanted to make sure to give you that opportunity to hear kind of a teaser of this podcast, why you need to listen to it. But definitely, it is appropriate more for, the audiences that are not young children. So we want to make sure to appreciate that a lot of you listen to the morning show with young children, but at the same time, parents and adults, you definitely need to know what is going on because this clearly shows how much the left is purposefully taking the trans agenda and they are twisting it and manipulating it for a completely different purpose than what they're telling you. And when they're telling you and me as Christians that we're discriminating somehow against, what's in the best interest of these minors, they're not even being upfront with what they're really trying to do. So this is an incredibly important interview. You can go to afr.net, click on the icon for podcasts, and you can listen to on demand. You can also listen on Spotify, iTunes, wherever you stream your podcast. That is out today. But here is just a teaser from my interview with Raw Egg Nationalist. This email was back, almost a decade ago. I mean, this is 8 years ago, is 2018. I mean, I would love to say this is only 2 years ago. I think we kind of all are still extending that. 2020 has been one long year. But, but this is now almost a decade ago. And this was not like a novel concept at the time that, this individual and Jeffrey Epstein were the first ones to pervert this whole notion of the trans agenda. But, to somehow suggest, his email even talks about how Trevor's email talks about how transsexual women, so men, are, quote, very attractive and could easily make money as prostitutes. I mean, it sinks lower and lower and lower. And so for not just for American law, but for the Western world as a whole that has drawn a line on truth, on reality, on biblical values. I mean, that is Western culture. It's the Judeo-Christian worldview. How can we start to use this more to point out that this is the logical conclusion of this false mindset and this false worldview, and that we can't trust someone just because they may be a world-renowned scientist? Well, he's absolutely wrong.
Yeah, it's interesting. We're told, aren't we? Or the slippery slope is classic logical fallacy. There's, you can't say that there's a slippery slope from one thing to another. And yet time and time again, the slippery slope is proven by experience to be a very good guide to what will happen. And yes, I mean, even back in the 1960s, the early days of the real, kind of the real radicalism that has gripped Western culture, the universities, and the culture more broadly, people were advocating for pedophilia. People were advocating for people like Allen Ginsberg, the poet, famously, was a pedophile advocate and probably a pedophile himself. These things were all predictable, and like you say, I mean, I think that they do, in a logical sense, they do actually kind of follow directly from the premises. They certainly follow from the premise that actually there is no such thing as immutable characteristics. Human beings don't have an immutable identity, and so, okay, first, what does that do? That eats away at gender, and that eats away at class and gender, but it gets to the biological level pretty quickly, and then you're talking about there's no age differences, there's no such thing as childhood, there's no such thing as adulthood. So, I mean, I think there need to be very, very robust protections in the law, and I've been very, very enthused to see that actually the Trump administration has started to do that, and has really, started to push back and to withdraw federal funding from healthcare facilities and clinics that do gender realignment surgery, or reassignment surgery rather, and hormone therapy and all that kind of stuff. So, I mean, I think that, yes, it obviously needs to be a legislative push against this, but we're also, as you mentioned at the beginning of the segment, there's a legal thing going on too, and more and more people are going to sue, and more people, I think, are going to be who've undergone gender reassignment surgery, hormone therapy, are going to sue, and hopefully the courts are going to find judges are going to find in their favor, and we're going to have a lot of legal pushback against this. We know, I mean, there's a wealth of research into the harms caused by gender reassignment surgery in particular. I mean, it doesn't sort people with gender dysphoria out. It actually worsens their condition, and it makes them more likely to kill themselves. I mean, that's very, very well established, but it's a very contentious point, obviously, among the transgender lobby, who want people to believe that the surgery and the hormone therapy is the answer. So I think there needs to be a multi-pronged attack against the transgender agenda. But like you say, I mean, we also in an individual sense, individually, I think we do need to arm ourselves against silly notions like, a Harvard evolutionary biologist is somebody to trust simply on the basis of the fact that he is a Harvard evolutionary biologist. I mean, it's not the case. You can rise to the heights of academia. You can be the most world-renowned thinker and still be down in the mud, somebody who is really morally a bad person. And that, I think that clearly is the case with Robert Trivers, having read this email and having learned more about his association with Jeffrey Epstein.
All right, so that was just a clip from my full, about half-hour interview with Raw Egg Nationalists. You can hear the full podcast wherever you stream. It's called On Demand with Jenna Ellis. You can also go to afr.net. Get it there, Spotify, iTunes, wherever you stream. Definitely listen to this full episode. You need to be aware of what is going on, what has been revealed through the Epstein files, and what the left is actually pushing in their agenda for our kids. We'll be right back with more.
If we lose this cultural war, we're going to have a hedonistic, humanistic society.
Discover the story of the culture warrior Don Wildman and how he went head-to-head with Hollywood, Playboy, the homosexual agenda, and the Disney empire. The movement Don started paved the way for Christians to boldly stand for truth and righteousness in a hostile culture. Watch Culture Warrior today for free. Visit culturewarrior.movie.
Washington Watch with Tony Perkins.
You look at 3 of the 4 justices there in Colorado that voted to remove him from the ballot. They all came from Ivy League schools that had been created as divinity schools. What a picture of the apostasy in America when it comes to the church.
Stay informed with Tony Perkins and his guests on Washington Watch, weekdays at 4 p.m. Central on AFR, or catch up anytime with the podcast at afr.net.
And if it seem evil unto you to serve the Lord, choose you this day whom ye will serve. My name is Abraham Hamilton III, and this is the Hamilton Minute. In the very last chapter of the book of Joshua, after years had been spent in settling the promised land, Joshua presented the Israelites with a proposition. After all they'd seen, done, and experienced, some still flirted with worshiping foreign gods, lowercase g. This drove Joshua to plainly challenge them. Choose you this day whom you will serve. Then in verse 23, he says, if you're going to serve the true God, then put away the foreign gods which are in your midst. Today we must make a similar resolution. Whom will we serve?
Listen each weekday from 5 to 6 p.m. Central for the Hamilton Corner, or visit the podcast page at afr.net for more from Abraham Hamilton III, Public Policy Analyst for the American Family Association.
Without even seeing them show up, I could feel like the darkness.
Jamie Sanchez is another Christian business proprietor who has been targeted for his faith. His Drip Cafe was opened to serve and help the homeless of downtown Denver.
We believe sex outside of marriage and homosexuality is a sin in God's eyes. And the enemy and his minions decided to use that as a platform.
Jesus told us persecution would come.
I would see them, just the rage and the hate. I pictured them doing that at the foot of the cross to Jesus. And I just remembered what he said, forgive them, Father, they know not what they do. And so I had to position my heart that way.
The Jamie Sanchez story is one of the videos of the Impact series at stream.afa.net.
It's been a crazy, crazy ride.
See Jamie's story and much more at stream.afa.net.
Welcome back to Jenna Ellis in the Morning on American Family Radio.
Welcome back. And as we continue to have the truth of the utter absurdity of the trans agenda put in the light of the truth, and more people are rejecting it for what it is, which is simply a false view of reality. And then that view is barreling down a spiral toward the logical conclusion of a false worldview, which is utter absurdity. More and more people are just seeing this for what it is. And there was a post that I've just been waiting to talk about, and the last segment on a Friday is sometimes the only time that we have to talk about it. But this just so perfectly encapsulates the ridiculousness of this logic. So this was a post, it looked like from Facebook that migrated its way over to X. And it was from, just some random account on Facebook. But there's a picture of these two individuals who, of course, are, trans, etc. We'll get to that because it's just so ridiculous. But so these pictures, and the caption is a trans man, so obviously a woman, right? So a trans man and a non-binary trans woman. So, okay, what? Well, we'll go back to that in a second. But a trans man and a non-binary trans woman are opening a coffee shop in Manchester together, and they say they will only serve non-binary and semi-bisexual people coffee. Little red heart emoji. This is just so utterly absurd. So, okay, first of all, how many people do you think are going to actually come and support your coffee shop? I mean, I hope that you're independently wealthy if you are specifying that niche of a market, that you're only going to serve coffee and only serve it to non-binary and semi-bisexual people. But I have so many questions because, first of all, so are they going to, along with like how Starbucks asks for your name and they write it on the cup, are they going to have like 75 boxes that ask you to declare your gender and sexual orientation before you order your latte? I mean, this is utterly absurd. Like, okay, well, if you don't check the correct, appropriate, trans mafia box, the security, throw them out. We're not going to serve you. I mean, this is so absurd and hilarious on so many levels. But the fact that they're so open to this, I mean, imagine if a conservative opened a shop of any kind and said, we're only going to serve straight, heterosexual, married people. Like, the ACLU would be all over this and like, discrimination, and how dare you ask people this, and how dare you, with your cis white, blah, 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 privilege, all of this stuff. But these people, the trans mafia adherents are loud and proud, and they literally say that. They are so full of pride, literally, that they are posting this publicly, and they're actually starting a coffee shop that says we openly discriminate against people that we don't prefer to serve on the basis of their gender and sexual orientation. I mean, this is how insane the left is, that it's always, no discrimination, diversity is wonderful. The pride flag basically gives you a seizure now anytime you look at it, because they've added so many stripes that represent all kinds of, crazy made up floof that they want to add to the, the gender and sexual orientation flag that they think is protected. The only thing that isn't on their insane pride flag is the straight white male. That's it. And in their world, it's perfectly fine to discriminate against white people because somehow, we're the perpetual oppressors. It's okay to discriminate against men because they're the perpetual oppressors against women, but they can't even define what a man or a woman is, which is hilarious. So how do you even put them in those categories to begin with? And then, the older male who is married, because somehow, traditional marriage is so offensive to this colorful, psychedelic rainbow flag that those are the people that it's perfectly fine in their worldview to oppress, to ostracize, and to say, we will not serve you. But the trans agenda has gotten so insane that now it's not just the, straight white male traditionally married Christian, because that's perfectly fine in their worldview to discriminate against. Now they're even discriminating against each other. If you aren't non-binary and semi-bisexual, they won't serve you coffee. I mean, that is how utterly absurd. I was just laughing so hard when I saw this. And this caption Like, we just have to take a second and say, all right, so non-binary and semi-bisexual, doesn't that sort of contradict itself? I mean, if they're non-binary, then they're saying we don't agree that there are only two genders, right? Like in their worldview, that's what non-binary means. And then semi-bisexual, bi literally means two in the English language. So if you're non-binary, you're rejecting the bi. But then if you are bisexual, you're embracing that there are only two genders, but you have to be semi-bisexual. You have to be is that like a maybe? Like maybe bi is okay, and so I'm like semi-bisexual. I mean, none of this even has meaning, but that's the point, is that the vague terminology of the trans mafia is purposefully vague so that they can contort it into whatever discrimination flavor of the month they happen to prefer, and it's probably on their flag and also on a Ben & Jerry's canister somewhere in a local supermarket freezer. I mean, this is how insane they are. So how do they even appropriately identify what qualifies as non-binary and semi-bisexual? I mean, how do they even know who, according to their own worldview premise, they're allowed to serve coffee to? I mean, and then let's take these two individuals that are proprietors of this coffee establishment, the trans man, right? So right there, you're saying that, I mean, and this is a woman, but you're saying that you have transitioned from something that is concrete definitionally. You were once something and you have transitioned into something else that you are identifying as a man. So right there is a binary, right? So already you are so inconsistent. So a trans man is a woman, and you're saying I went from one thing to another, which we know from biology is a physical impossibility. But even taking biology out of it in terms of like the transition itself and how you can't possibly actually like change your chromosomes, the fact that language itself and the language they are using itself is a contradiction in terms to say that if you are a trans man, you are affirming that you were once one concrete definitional defined gender, and you are moving, transing into the different gender, right? Like that's what they're saying. That's what they are signaling by saying a trans man. And so right there, you are agreeing with the binary, because nobody has suggested that they are now, trans something other than a man or a woman. They're not like, oh, I'm now, a trans like third gender option quadrilateral or something like that, right? I'm not going to bring math into this, sorry. But, nobody has ever suggested that. So right there, they're already agreeing with the truth of reality and the binary, but then they're only going to serve non-binary people. So can this woman who claims to be a trans man, can she not serve herself at this coffee establishment? Like, she can't go in as the proprietor and actually pour herself a cup of coffee? Because it seems like according to her rules, she can't even serve herself a cup of coffee because she's not non-binary. If she's a trans man, then she's not non-binary. But then the partner who claims to be non-binary is also a trans woman. So this is where it gets even more absurd. So the trans man, the woman, and the non-binary trans woman, the man who is by definition adhering to the binary status of immutable sex, that it's man or woman and that's it, because definitionally is saying I was a man and I transitioned to being a woman, so he's still a man, but he's saying I was one thing, a man, and now I transitioned and I'm claiming to be, falsely, a woman, right? So I'm going from one to the other. That's binary. But then claiming non-binary. So how can you be a non-binary trans woman? That's like a self-defeating definition. And so he can maybe, under the terms of this establishment, serve himself, maybe? But how can you be a non-binary trans woman if you're like in the binary, but then saying you're non-binary? I mean, it's so utterly absurd. And this is where the false logic, if you disclaim reality, you get into this utter depraved absurdity. And it's so bad that we need to call it out for what it is, because this isn't, a celebration of someone's identity and what they prefer to be, and how we all would grow up, and at least in like the age of the 80s and 90s, like when I grew up, and we still had a little bit more rationality in the general overall society, and it was all like like the Army slogan, be all that you can be, and you're taught like you can grow up and you can do anything, and it's like, well, yeah, within reason, right? And the whole point of that messaging was to say, go pursue your dreams. And if you want to, work hard and go to law school and become a lawyer like I did, then, great, go do it. Now, as hard as I might try, I probably couldn't be, an aerospace engineer like my dad, because I just personally don't have the same type of capacity. I wasn't built and created with a special skill set given by God to do that high of math. I mean, that's part of why I went to law school. I was told we didn't have to do math, and it was a wonderful thing. Logic just came a little a little easier to me than math. But we have aptitudes and skill sets that God has given to us as part of our unique identity in Him. We're all made in the image of God. We all have immutable characteristics, but we also have aptitudes and skills. And so this whole be all that you can be, great. But, the left has taken kind of that sort of messaging that's grounded in reality, and they have made it so patently absurd that all they're doing is now self-discriminating. Like that's the absurd conclusion of their logic, is that a man and a woman who claim, ridiculous other terms that are actually grounded in reality because their language cannot identify even the false narrative that they are selecting without borrowing from reality. They can't even claim to be a non-binary trans woman without claiming binary, which we understand from reality, and woman, which we understand from reality, and even trans, like being in transition. I mean, that has a meaning that is grounded in truth and reality. They cannot even self-identify without borrowing from the truth of reality that then ultimately shows the utter fiction of their narrative, and they're now self-discriminating even in their own little coffee shop. And I just found it utterly hilarious on one hand, but then also utterly tragic, because these people don't even see their absurdity, the illogic, and how they're actually borrowing from the trans mafia agenda so far that they are the logical conclusion is that now they're actually discriminating against themselves because this woman who claims to be a trans man now can't even serve himself coffee at his own establishment based on his own rules. That is how absurd this is. And so it's utterly tragic that some are caught up in this false worldview and this fiction that they don't even recognize that they're discriminating against themselves now, and that they have borrowed so much fiction and they have bought into the lie and rejected so much of the truth of the reality to which God presents us and He confines us to, that they are now spewing this nonsense. I mean, we need to pray for this country for a wake-up call, and I think we are starting to see the glimmers of hope in this rejection of the genital mutilation surgeries, the actual harm in concrete reality that this worldview foists and victimizes upon the youngest of us. And some of these children that like this case that we've been talking about this week of the double mastectomy of this young girl when she was only 16. I mean, that has real and lasting consequences. So it's not just about these purple haired idiots that go and wave their psychedelic seizure inducing flag. It's that ideas ultimately do have consequences in reality, and we have to push back with truth. We can push back with humor, but ultimately in love as well, trying to show the truth of reality and the truth of a creator that has made us in His image, has confined us to reality, and because of that reality shows us ultimately that He loves us, He cares for us, and that we can have hope in Him because He offers us the free gift of salvation and a reconciled relationship with Him, and that we can reject sin, we can reject all forms of these ridiculous identities, when really what these two individuals are seeking is a relationship and an identity in Christ. Because clearly they're trying to find identity in something utterly false and fictional. That is not going to satisfy. The only thing that satisfies is our identity in Christ. So we just had to cover that one. And we are also, in order to combating the false narratives and the false worldviews and ideologies of the left, I have started a TikTok, which is kind of taking off, which is a really encouraging thing, posting videos and responses to some of these, just utterly nonsensical fictional viewpoints and maybe some confused viewpoints from especially young people who are seeing some of this, like what happened at the Grammys last weekend, and saying, well, wait a minute, I know what Billie Eilish is saying is wrong, that like we live on stolen land, so nobody's illegal. Well, I did a video on it, and we posted that on my TikTok, on my Instagram, Facebook, and also X pages. And a lot of people are saying, this really has been helpful to have, in just 45 seconds to a minute and a half. I mean, these aren't long radio segments. But these short form videos, they can get the nuggets of truth, and they can have an argument that opposes these lies from the world and say, okay, yes, like I knew there was something off about that, but I need to know from the truth of reality, from the truth of American constitutional law, and the truth of the biblical worldview, how to answer the left's lies with biblical truth. And so definitely, if you are on any of these platforms, please go and follow me on X and on TikTok. It is at Real Jenna Ellis. On Facebook and Instagram, we're at Jenna Ellis Media. We're going to be doing more of these. A lot of you have already submitted some requests for response videos, have given me a lot of great ideas for content. Ultimately, what we're hoping to do as well is to drive that audience back and young people back to listen to our shows here on AFR, because these shows are packed with truth. We're not just spouting, the Republican agenda or, the RNC sort of mouthpiece like a lot of other conservative stations. We are here for one purpose, which is to answer the lies with truth, to promote the biblical worldview, the truth of the gospel of Christ, and take the headlines of every day and to answer them in love with the truth. So as always, you can reach me and my team, Jenna at afr.net.
The views and opinions expressed in this broadcast may not necessarily reflect those of the American Family Association or American Family Radio.
Faith, family, freedom. American Family Radio.